Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Danny. I'll be the presenter today, flying solo. Very excited for today's session as we're going to talk about file shares on AWS and how Amazon FSx for NetApp on tap is the right solution, giving us fast, resilient, and cost effectiveness at scale. Now, as we begin, I'd like to talk a little bit about myself, my background. As I've said, I'm working at NetApp. I've been a cloud solutions architect at NetApp. Now I work for the product enablement team. And before that, I've been working for various companies and education and in a university as well, building solutions, whether it's SaaS solutions or other platforms on AWS. And for this webinar, I really tried to put myself back in my old shoes and trying to think about different solutions on AWS, different use cases, which what they all had in common were that they had data and had to essentially store that data somewhere, and what were the considerations. So I want to start by talking about choosing the right file storage on AWS. We can do infinite amount of things on AWS, and therefore we need to think about the storage solution to keep our data. Some consideration when choosing a file storage service. First of all, accessibility. We want our application or applications in the plural to access our data, and different applications have different ways of accessing the data or creating or generating the data. So for example, I think a good example is from my own past is, let's say we've got our business users working in a Windows environment in a VDI using CIFS file shares that correspond with the SSO. And on the other hand, the application generates the data on a Linux server, as big servers typically are. That's one common use case. How do we address that? Another good example is we're working on AWS. We want to take advantage of the different services that AWS have to offer when it comes to data management, AI, of course, the different models such as Bedrock, etc. So we also want the different services to access that. Other than that is availability. This is especially relevant. We want our data to be available. Depends on how, if our use case is mission critical, is it a production environment, and what are the SLAs that we need to withstand. So we also want, usually, especially if we're working in stateful applications, which is going to be the basis of this webinar naturally, is we want our data is the most important element of our application. That's the biggest asset of our business typically, and we want that to be protected and available. Once again, depending on our SLAs, it could be very strict, could be not so strict, but still we want to protect our data, whether for backups or to have a DR site ready for recovery should a major disaster happen. Data security, essentially everybody, I guess, now in every vertical, it's not necessarily in the usual suspects, such as financial sector or the healthcare sector or different security companies, etc. Everybody's worried today about data security, about making sure that our data is accessible only to those who need to access it, or only to the specific resources that need access to the data. So the ability to secure our data, to segregate the data, and to make sure that only the relevant business users or the different resources have access to the data. And that's one of the major things that we've saw in our poll. Cost and performance. On the one hand, we want our storage solution not to satisfy our performance need. I'm sure we've all had in our past encountered bottlenecks and latencies that were caused by the storage solution, whatever we were using at the time. So we definitely don't want our storage service to plug and jam our performance. And on the other hand, we don't want our CFO to strangle us. We don't want to make them upset. We have a budget, no matter how big it is. We still have a budget, and we need to withstand it, It's very easy to let loose, to throw our money at performance, and at the end of the day, we've got a bloated DBR, and where does that take us? And last but not least, we have our data kept somewhere. We want to typically, especially if we have different people spread around the world, especially in the last 4 or 5 years after COVID, we might have different developers sitting in different locations, or working with our digital nomad suppliers who are working in the other side of the world. But we do need to introduce the data to them. We need to shift our data around, whether it is between regions in AWS or between edge locations or remote workstations, etc. And on the other hand, as alluded to in the second to last pillar, second to last concern, we don't want to bloat our budget. So there's another concern there. Now it's time to talk about our main topic, which is Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP. What is it? It's an intelligent storage service for AWS workloads. Essentially, it is an AWS managed service. Although this webinar is hosted by NetApp, but FSx for ONTAP is an AWS storage service. That means that, like other services in AWS, it is part of the storage pillar. We have different categories in AWS. We've got compute, we've got networking, now we've got AI and other categories. But the first category was storage. And one of the storage services is the FSx family, different flavors of file systems. And we have FSx, an Amazon storage service with NetApp ONTAP under the bonnet. What does that mean? If you are familiar with NetApp ONTAP, essentially you get a managed version of ONTAP in the cloud. That means that all the heavy lifting of managing an ONTAP system is shifted to AWS. They're the one who are managing it, like every other managed service. What do you get as the customer? You get the comprehensive set of feature that comes with ONTAP. That means accessibility, the ability to handle file, block, and object storage, a multi-protocol. You get NFS, SMB, iSCSI. Now that we're, and here specifically with AWS, what comes and is very helpful is the ONTAP S3 protocol, meaning that AWS services can access your FSx for ONTAP volume using the S3 protocol, gaining access to AWS services. When it comes to resilience and protection, we enjoy the high availability aspect of spreading our file system across multiple AZs with the multi-AZ configuration. We've got replication, where we can replicate our data in real time with increments to different FSx for ONTAP file systems in different regions, so we can get regional replication. So if a major disaster hits, for example, and an entire region in AWS is not available, you can set yourself a DR environment in a different region. We also get a local immediate snapshots that give us backups that can really shorten our RPO. And we can put these snapshots in a remote location with the AWS backup service. So we've got to handle the 3-2-1 approach. We've got a DR side, we've got local backups and remote backups. Data security. So you can, with FSx for ONTAP, you can, maybe you have one file system, but you can have networking level isolation with storage virtual machines. That means that each volume for each application, for example, or for each tenant in a SaaS environment for different customers, you can isolate it on an IP level, on a different IP scope, a logical segregation for different components. Once again, I'll have to refer back to my experience when creating SaaS environment for insurance companies. They were very adamant that we use single tenants, meaning completely different IP scopes for each tenant. And here with the storage virtual machines, you can essentially host multiple tenants as single tenants. You can also use Active Directory authentication, so business users can use their SSOs. Also can have immutable storage, write once, read many, relevant more for the more security prone among them, and built-in malware protection. We've got price performance, some data footprint reduction that we're going to talk about the different cost-saving aspects of FSX for ONTAP, and on-demand performance control. Talk about that. Essentially, on the one hand, FSX for ONTAP can give us great performance, and we're going to talk about the raw data. And on the other hand, you can balance it with cost efficiency and other cost-saving features. And data mobility and copy, we have instance space saving clones. You can create readable, writable copies of your data for dev environments, for pre-prod environments, with zero penalty. Only when you're starting to write on the copies, then it starts to accumulate data. You can create similarly, you can create remote cache, readable, writable cache copies of your data for edge locations. And last but not least, with the same mechanism for disaster recovery, you can also migrate your data easily if you, for some reason, need to leave one region and go to the other. I'm sure a good example is, for example, when the Canada region opened a few years ago, some Canadian companies migrated from US regions to Canadian regions. So that's one example why you need to migrate your data entirely from one region to another. So let's start talking about accessibility. So with accessibility, you can access the same data from different protocols. A good example is, let's say you've got a server working on residing on a Linux OS, generating different logs, different data sets that later your business users need to manipulate. Then you can, with FSX for ONTAP, both parties can reside on the same volumes. The server residing on Linux can write with NFS, and the business users can access the same exact volume using CIFS shares with their SSO. And then the file system can authenticate them and authorize them should they do require access to the volume. That gives you essentially reduces the need to duplicate the copies and gives us multiple access from different operating systems and different protocols. Another interesting bit here is creating volumes that get access to S3. ONTAP, I think from version 9.15, introduced the ONTAP S3 protocol, that allows AWS services access to your data. So you can use it for Athena, Prometheus, Bedrock, etc. They can gain access to your data and do whatever manipulations, etc. needed there. And time to start with a customer story. The way we're going to do it, we're going to talk about each of the pillars and give an example. And this example is one of my favorites because it is a NetApp example. So just to show that we're putting our money where our mouths are. NetApp IT, our very own IT, decided to expand to AWS. And when choosing the file system, the obvious choice was FSX for ONTAP. Why? Because the NetApp people are very veteran NetApp people who have lots of experience, especially with NetApp systems, wanted something that they are very familiar with. So going to FSX for ONTAP was their choice. Essentially, although it is a managed ONTAP versions, for them it was very easy to make the move from an on-premise ONTAP system to FSX for ONTAP. They could also use SnapMirror to SnapMirror the data, to copy the data, to replicate the data from the on-prem ONTAP systems to FSX for NetApp ONTAP. And specifically, there were some use cases that required the ability to access the same volume, both from Windows machines and Linux machines, and there they utilize the multi-protocol access. So basically, the solution gave them the answer to all the requirements. It gave the IT engineers the ability to use on the old familiar ONTAP, which they knew and love, and essentially, on the one hand, gave us the flexibility and elasticity of the cloud. On the one hand, on the other hand, gave the variety of ONTAP features. Now let's talk a little bit about resilience and protection. How do we keep our data safe? How do we work according to best practices, making sure that our data is available, kept, and as resilient as possible to disasters. So first of all is high availability. If you have a high availability SLA, you need to, let's say, for example, one of the availability zones in AWS is not available. Happens sometimes. If there's a local failure, a hardware failure in Amazon, etc., then high availability, multi-AZ high availability is the best practice. That means you've got an active node, an active passive node replicated in real time, making sure that your data is simultaneously kept on 2 AZs in whatever region you choose to deploy your FSX system. If your FSX system, on the other hand, is not mission critical, you can also choose the more economical deployment of a single AZ. But if the data is data loss is an issue, then of course it's not recommended. In addition, you can maintain short RPO with local and immediate local backups. What I like about the NetApp snapshots that can also be used in FSX is that you can take a backup. It does not accumulate, does not take up space until you're starting to change the volume, and only then the storage penalty begins. And once again, only for the difference between the snapshot and the volume itself. In addition to keeping it locally, which does have it, on the one hand, it's very good for RPO because you can recover quickly. On the other hand, if the system itself fails, then you lose the backup. So the backup service that comes with FSX for ONTAP is the AWS backup for FSX. It takes these same snapshots and keep them, in a storage pool, in a remote storage pool, giving you a remote backup of your data available should the file system itself fails. And last but not least, cross-region disaster recovery readiness. You can replicate your data to a different file system in a different region because it is ONTAP to ONTAP. So for those familiar with ONTAP, you can use SnapMirror to copy the data between the two regions. And because we are working in AWS, the FSX file system do not have to be in the same size. You can keep a smaller size DR system, copy the data there, keep it dormant until God forbid a disaster strikes, and then you can fail over to your DR file system, make it grow using the elasticity of the cloud, make it grow to your needs, and fail over to it and continue your business. And as before, let's give an example with a customer story. So our customer story is in for Cloverleaf. They're essentially they achieved 9.99 availability uptime for their mission critical healthcare data. They have multiple healthcare applications that are mission critical, must be available 24/7 with very, very aggressive SLAs. They deployed these applications on the Elastic Kubernetes service, the managed Kubernetes service for AWS. And for the persistent volumes, they tried a few services, but eventually ended up with FSX for NetApp ONTAP. Why? For several reasons. First of all, the first requirement was the multi-AZ deployment, because as we've said, these are mission critical These are mission critical applications that cannot tolerate downtime. So if an availability zone is not available, that's a major issue for them. And another reason was performance. They had great performance requirements, and the performance part of the performance requirement of FSx for ONTAP were also very helpful, because their applications were basically generating millions of files with millions of little files, around 1K, 2K, and that was a bit too much for other services to handle. So they chose, for the high availability and for the performance reason, they chose FSx for NetApp ONTAP. And with that, I think we can advance to the next pillar, data security. So in data security, we're talking about protecting our data from accidental access or deletion, or from malicious access or deletion, etc. How do we make sure that the data is encrypted and restricted? So first of all, one of the features there is strict data segregation. You can segregate the data on a networking level with a different IP scope with storage virtual machines, meaning you have one file system serving different tenants, different applications, maybe different organizations. And typically the ability to have a different IP scope is typically compliant for the more security-minded customers, as you are working in a completely different IP scopes and with other security mechanisms such as authentication and authorization, where you can use IAM or the service directory to help you when it comes to authenticating and then authorizing the users and making sure that they are you can authenticate their identity and then authorize them according to their identity and give them access only if they do need so. And last but not least, data encryption today almost comes as standard. So of course, data is encrypted and at transit and by default at rest. And here our customer story is about a company called Peraton. Peraton is a national security and IT company which is providing system engineering and IT services to different intelligence and security companies. Although they are a public reference, we don't know a lot about their use case, which is, of course, understandable. But I think it does exemplify that even the most security-minded customers are choosing and are feeling quite safe using FSx for ONTAP for their security concerns, using both the security tools provided by AWS in addition to security features and overall robustness of the security that comes with FSx for NetApp ONTAP. So their challenge was actually a migration challenge and using clouds for bursting, and they used FSx for ONTAP to do that, to migrate the relevant data set, basically enjoying high availability, reliability, security using segregated SVMs, and of course the Active Directory integration. Okay, and let's talk, I think, about the most interesting aspect here. And here a little spoiler alert, we're also going to have a demo of our TCO calculator, which is data reduction. How do we reduce our storage costs? Storage is also one of those items in our detailed billing report at the end of the month that usually is more than we have expected. So the first part is tiering is data tiering for those among the audience who are NetApp, who come with prior NetApp knowledge. Probably is going to sound familiar, probably going to sound a lot like Fabric Pool, because it is essentially the same engine. So FSx for NetApp ONTAP lets us cool our unused data and put it on a more economical storage tier. Essentially, FSX for ONTAP comes with two storage tiers. It comes with the SSD, which is more performant, and with a capacity tier, which is more suited for the more larger data sets that you need to keep and that you don't read and write too frequently to. Very fitting for archiving, etc. Now, the thing is with storage tiering in general and also with FSX that typically you've got the distribution of 20% of our data is accessed quite frequently, read or written to, and the last 80% is not accessed that often, and it makes more sense instead of keeping it on a very expensive SSD drives to put it on the capacity tier. And this is what storage tiering does for us. It automatically tiers our data to the capacity tier. We can play with the configuration and customize it to our needs. So if we know that our FSX is used for archiving purposes or for use cases that are storage extensive but with infrequent access, then we can set our tiering to be more aggressive. But if it's all our data is high performance entirely, and all the data is accessed, we don't have to enable tiering at all. And I think the great majority of customers go with the in-between approach of cooling the data after 30 days that it has not been read or written to. So essentially, data is tiered automatically and cooled to the capacity tier. FSX for ONTAP also comes with storage efficiencies, compression, deduplication, and compaction, where we can reduce our data footprint, taking up less space. And another one is thin provisioning, where you can overcommit to your applications, and then from your available SSD, you can allocate to the application only the SSD that they are actually using. So if, for example, you have over-committed to your application 80 terabytes, but you've got only 40 terabytes of SSD, but your applications have only written about 20 terabytes to the disk, then you don't have to grow because you still have the capacity. And the benefits are that you can start small and grow when needed, and provision SSD storage only when you really need to, and you can sort of plan for later. It gives you the breathing space, and most importantly, keeping that DBR low. Let's talk about our customer story here. Our customer is AESA. They're a global technology and engineering services provider. They have a global team. That team need to collaborate and share data for different projects around the world. And they wanted to, like most of us, wanted to reduce their data footprint, reduce the amount of money that they're paying for storage. They elected to migrate to FSX for ONTAP, and with the combination of storage efficiency, tiering, and growing only when needed, they were able to reduce their storage costs quite significantly, and essentially lower the cloud storage so they can actually spend on what they need. And here I think is a good time for a quick demo. Before we begin, let's talk a bit about what I'm going to show. So here at NetApp, we have created a management platform for FSX for NetApp ONTAP called BlueXP Workload Factory. You can do many, many things with it. I'm not going to get into that. What I'm going to show you is the thing that you can try right now without all you need to do is give your email. You don't need to put in AWS credentials or anything like that. That part is the storage is a cost calculator. What I like about our cost calculator that it is essentially using AWS calculator APIs. So it is very honest, essentially. If if FSX is not the right solution for you, then you're going to see it very clearly. So without further ado, let me jump into the calculator. Okay, let's quickly share my screen again. Okay, there we are. Okay, so I've logged into my BlueXP workload factory at console workload factory at netapp.com. For those for my colleagues who are on the call, if you can put it in the chat, that would be nice. I'm going to explore saving. I can compare the cost of FSX for ONTAP to other storage services like EBS, Windows File Server, and EFS. Let's go with the Elastic file system. Now I'm getting a pop-up here that I can also calculate according to my existing volume. Now, in this calculator, or in this environment, I already have my credentials, my AWS credentials put in. So BlueXP can read, I can give it essentially read-only credentials to scan my environment and see if FSX can help me with my current delivery. And since this is a demo, I'll avoid it now. I'll just, excuse me, create a use case. So let's go with general IT application. Puts the region. Now the region is important. Different regions have different costs. So that sometimes that changes. We can look at our file system, whether it's regional or a single AZ, but it is an IT application. So let's be real. It is regional. I can play with the storage capacity. It's here. It's 10 terabyte. Let's put it 100 for sports. Data of frequently accessed. Remember, we're talking about data tiering, so that's the amount I'm guessing that that is going to be kept on the SSD environment, on the SSD, on the performance tier, and my throughput, etc. So what I get here, I get a breakdown of my potential costs on my monthly cost saving, the percentage. I've got the total calculation between EFS and FSX for ONTAP, and I've got the breakdown. And if I want to really understand the breakdown, I can look here and view the calculations themselves. How do we get there? We can really expand everything. Let's go back. Yep. Accidentally close the window. Freeze. And let's say let's say I'm happy with what I got. I can, first of all, I can export a PDF and then share it with my colleagues who don't have access to FSX for NetApp, who don't have access to this calculator, and then show the savings and how the calculation was made. I can save the configuration for later. And then access it if I want to deploy FSX for ONTAP. But if I'm really convinced, I can create it and it will open the menu once again here. You need to put on your credentials. But if you don't want to put credentials, you can get an API request. You can get a CloudFormation stack if you want to create your FSX for ONTAP or a Terraform, whatever it is you want. It takes a bit of time. No demo like a live demo. And that's essentially it. You can play. You can once again compare it to EBS, to EFS, and to to the FS for Windows services. Now, let's go back to the deck. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the performance aspects. What performance can we get from FSX? Essentially, you get to configure your performance according to the application, according to the throughput that you need. You've got the number of guaranteed IOPS. The maximum is up to 2.4 millions. The network throughput is up to 72 gigs. The SSD storage is limited to up to 1 petabyte. And we're talking about cache more in the context of sharing our data externally with edge locations. But here, there are also in-memory cache with NVMe and other that can really boost your performance for the frequently accessed data. And essentially, you can also, for example, if you're working on high-performance databases, etc., you can also work exclusively on the performance there, etc. Once again, depends on your workload. You can make the calculations and see whether FSX for ONTAP can help can meet your performance standard. I think for many of the high performance workloads, definitely does give an answer. And once again, I urge you to take it yourself and see if it helps you. One of the customers that come to mind when we're talking about performance is Comics Wave Films. For those who come from the video generating and video processing world, you know, it's a highly performative task. You need lots of IOPS to process and render videos. And that was exactly the problem that Comics Waves faced before migrating to AWS. They had major bottlenecks on the on-premise data center. They had issues when handling large-scale production workloads with many small files, and that delayed time to market and releases, etc. So they migrated to FSX for NetApp ONTAP. They were able to boost their IOPS from 200 to 21,000. Essentially, the amount of data that they handled as the result of the migration jumped to about almost to more than 1.5, almost more than 1.5 files, so around almost 17 million. Basically, the migration allowed them to open that IOPS bottleneck and meet the demanding schedules and stay within their budget. And last but not least, talk a little bit about data mobility and copies. So we talked about our caching mechanism. We have maybe we have edge locations, maybe we have pre-prod environments, development environments that need to work on data sets. We want to introduce our data on the one hand. On the other hand, we don't want to get storage penalties. We don't want to get. We want to speed up the time that we introduce our data to our different developers, to our QA people, etc. So here comes our cloning mechanism. We can create thin clones that are instant. They reflect the original volume. They are readable and writable, and only take up space once you make changes in the clone. And when you've finished your business, you can terminate them and go back to business as usual, minimizing the storage penalty of the entire process. Accessing data in edge locations, we can create cache volumes in our edge locations that are also readable, writable, and don't take a storage penalty. And if we want to migrate and move data easily, then we can use the built-in replication. For those who are familiar with ONTAP, I mentioned it many times. SnapMirror to move data from one file system to another. Then, if you need to, you can deprecate the source. If you want to move between regions in AWS, between ONTAP systems, then SnapMirror lets you do that quite easily as a built-in tool. And we've also mentioned the DR possibility of SnapMirror. And we're going to finish with a customer story. Unfortunately, this story it's not public reference, but we're talking about an American video game developer. They used FSX to shorten development cycles. Like many other companies, they have developers in about 40 different sites. They wanted to introduce they sort of had a spoken hub environment. They wanted to introduce the data quickly to the developers to create development and ad hoc development environments, because they had many quick cycles with many fixes to push, etc. That being a live game available worldwide. So by using the thin data clones, they were able to clone their data in different developer environments quickly. The developers were able to push their fixes. Then QA were able to perform their quality assurance actions there. And at the end of the work process, they could terminate the environment quickly without incurring a penalty cost and with being very quick at the process. And and wanted to share with you the resources that we've had in creating this this presentation. We've got the product page, frequently asked questions, some tutorials if you want to get your hands dirty with FSX for ONTAP, some documentation. You can also use the TCO calculator with the QR code. And also, if you're interested in some other webinars that we've discussed more about, specifically about disaster recovery, maybe about databases, we have previous webinar recordings available with me and with other people. And I'll be very happy. I'll be very happy if you take a look at those, and hope they'll be helpful. Now I think it's a good time to stop the share and take a look at some of the questions. And I understand that there are a few that were left answered. Let's see if I can. Okay, start with the quick ones. When will the use of Glacier in AWS be added? I don't think Glacier is currently on the roadmap. I do know that another infrequent access tier is going to be added. I think Glacier doesn't really fit the script here because it is very slow to extract data once you read it. So I don't think that's there. Does the capacity tier uses HD disks or uses S3D storage? Well, AWS doesn't disclose that, but let's say that the name capacity pool gives us quite a hint as what is used under the bonnet. I'll give you a hint. It has 3 S's in it. Another question: are there functional differences between Amazon FSx for NetApp and Azure Cloud Azure Cloud Volumes? I'm imagining that you're referring to CVO on Azure. Yes, there are differences. If you're familiar with CVO, then you can think of FSx as a managed CVO on AWS. Essentially, CVO is the non-managed ONTAP on the cloud, and FSx is managed. There are some slight operational differences, not many. Don't have a lot of time to discuss that in this short Q&A session. But essentially, they're both ONTAP systems with CVO gives you, I think, a bit more space because it's self-managed and not a managed service like FSx. From Michał, will there be in the future an option to compare cost with ONTAP CVO? Guess you're referring to Amazon. I don't know. Good question. I doubt it. Okay. Okay. Another question about is the actual data stored in the AWS data center? What sort of compliance does FSx volumes GDPR? So yes, FSx is an AWS service. That means that data underneath resides in AWS regions, like when you put data in S3 or on EBS, etc. And when it comes to compliance and with GDPR, I had my own experience when GDPR just came out of certifying solutions for GDPR. Yes, I know it could be quite taxing. So essentially, to answer that, Amazon in all services, FSX including, FSX for ONTAP included, have what they call the shared responsibility model. That the hardware and everything managed by AWS is certified, but because you do have control on firewalls and networking and security groups, etc., then you also have some responsibility. For example, if you put something on AWS and open the security groups for the entire world, then obviously it's not going to be compliant. So it is very much possible from personal experience to certify your deliveries for GDPR and for CCCO, etc. on AWS. It is possible, but you do have some responsibility. You can have a whole webinar on that. So that's you'll have to dig into that yourself, but in short, it is possible. Okay. How do you think? Okay. It's an interesting question. How do you think FSX is better than different file storage like Azure NetApp Files, Wasabi Hot Claw? Okay. I think the biggest advantage of those you've mentioned, Azure NetApp Files is in Azure. So if you want me to work in Azure, then FSX for ONTAP is, first of all, it's for AWS. So it's a bit hard for me to compare things that are not for AWS. Azure NetApp Files, unlike somebody mentioned Azure CVO, Azure NetApp Files is also a managed service, but it's much more restrictive than FSX for ONTAP. In FSX for ONTAP, you actually get, for example, in Azure NetApp Files, you can't snap mirror. You can't use snap mirror to snap mirror your data from on-premises ONTAP. You get more freedom from in FSX than you do in Azure NetApp Files. Once again, Azure NetApp Files has amazing use cases. It's a great tool. Once again, but if you're working in Azure, then you're working in Azure, and that's a different story. So it would be it's a different comparison. Is SF another good question from Michał Tkacz? Is SVM DR also supported procedure as how to migrate data to AWS? I know that SVMDR is in the works. There's some solution on it. I'd rather not, once again, a bit too complicated to answer here, but I would look it up. If you don't get answers, if you have especially if you're a NetApp customer, I would consult with NetApp support. I'm sure they can give you more experienced and knowledgeable answers than me. What else? What is the cost difference using EFS and NetApp storage using ONTAP? Well, excellent question. Use the storage calculator, put in your details, and you can get a comparison great comparison between EFS and FSX for NetApp ONTAP. Okay, what else? Is it possible to manage FSX? Yeah. Excellent question, because I have a good answer for it. Is it possible to manage Amazon FSX for NetApp ONTAP via BlueXP? Yes, it is. Not only that, because you asked, unlike other ways of managing FSX for ONTAP, you can actually access System Manager. And that's the only way to access System Manager, is if you use BlueXP to manage your FSX for NetApp ONTAP. I hope. So I see Bartek had another question. What kind of service are you positioning to back up AWS FSX? Is it possible to use NetApp Cloud Backup, or do you have your own recommendation? So it comes with its built-in service called AWS Backup, which is essentially an AWS managed version of Cloud Backup. So I guess that's a very straightforward answer there. Is NDMP supported? I'm not sure. That's the first time I encountered that question. An interesting one. I'll have to look into that. I'm not sure myself. And I think with that we answered Oh, there was another question I think I missed. Is the BR copy synchronous? Yes, with snap mirror replication, that's the engine under the replication. It is synchronous. So you can choose the intervals. You could be very aggressive if you have your RTO, like having a sync every few minutes. And the beautiful thing about the replication is that you transfer the bulk and then it does it by increment. So it could be quite synchronous indeed. And then should you have a disaster, you can fail over to. I think with that, we covered the questions, at least the questions I can answer with one-liners. I like to thank everybody for attending. Thank you very much for coming and giving me your time and listening to what we had to say. And special thanks for my colleagues who helped me moderate and make this webinar flowing more smoothly. And thank you very much for posting your questions, making this an interactive webinar, and giving me the privilege of interacting with you. So thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And I hope to see you in future webinars. Thank you very, very much and have a great rest of the day.